Chapter 10. In the Face of Light Extinguished. After the dead Nimbus agents had been placed on the pyre, Scythe Faraday lowered the torch to the kindling and set it ablaze. The fire took, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. The smoke turned darker and darker as the dead began to burn. Faraday turned to those assembled, Munera, Loriana, and all the former Nimbus agents. He was silent for a long moment, listened to the roar of the flames. Then he began his eulogy. "Ages ago, birth came with a death sentence," he began. "To be born meant that death would eventually follow. We have surpassed such primitive times, but here, in the unexamined wild, nature still retains its crushing foothold on life. It is with abiding sorrow that I declare the deadish here before us now be dead. Let the grief we feel for the lost be eased by our nanites, but even more so by our memories of the lives they lived. And today, I make a promise to you that these fine men and women will not be obliterated nor dishonored. Who they were until the moment they crossed into the blind spot will most certainly be preserved as memory constructs within the Thunderhead's backbrain. And I will personally count them among my own gleaned, if and when we leave this place. I will honor them by granting immunity to their loved ones, as we Scythes are charged to do." Scythe Faraday let his words linger for a moment, and while most of the others couldn't bear to look, Faraday turned to gaze into the flames. He stood tearless and resolute as the bodies were consumed, a solemn witness returning the dignity that unsanctioned death had stolen from these people. Loriana could not bring herself to look into the fire. Instead, she focused on Faraday. Many Nimbus agents approached him to thank him. It brought a few tears to her eyes to see how they revered and respected him. It gave her hope that the Scythedom could, in time, recover from the sinking of Endura. Loriana knew little of the battle between the Old Guard and the New Order. Like many, she just knew that there was trouble within their ranks, and that as a Nimbus agent, it was none of her business. She was impressed, however, by Faraday's eulogy and by the way he unflinchingly looked into the flames. Although she knew that the sorrow he felt as he gazed into the fire was about more than just the dead before them. "Were you close?" Loriana asked when the others around them had left. "To Scythe Curie, I mean." Scythe Faraday took a deep breath, but then coughed from the smoke as the breeze momentarily shifted direction. "We were very old friends," Faraday told her, "and Scythe Anastasia had been my apprentice. The world will be a much dimmer place without them." While Scythe Curie was legendary, Scythe Anastasia had only recently become a figure of note in the world. How she allowed people to choose the time and nature of their gleaning. How she had forced an inquest. No doubt much would be made of her in the coming years. Sometimes death leads to public oblivion. Other times it can make you larger than life. "I'd better go," Loriana said, "before Munera gets jealous." Faraday offered a faint grin at that. "She is very protective of me," he admitted, "and I of her." Loriana left to find Dr. Hillyard. While none of the other Nimbus agents had the fortitude to watch the dead burn, Director Hillyard hadn't even attended the ceremony. It was unlike her. Loriana found her sitting on the beach, far from the others, looking at the sea. There was no light but the flames of the distant pyre, and the wind kept shifting, making it impossible to ignore the smell of smoke. The moon was shining elsewhere in the world, leaving the horizon obscured by darkness. Loriana sat beside her and said nothing at first, because what was there to say that could make this any better?
What the director needed right now was company, and no one else was willing to provide it. "This is my fault," Hillyard finally said. "You couldn't have known this would happen," Loriana told her. "I should have anticipated the danger," she said, "and I should have turned us around the second the boat computers lost contact with the Thunderhead. You made a judgment call. If I were you, I probably would have done the same." Still, the director was not mollified. "Then you're just as foolish as me." And although Loriana often felt foolish and the butt of other agents' jokes, she wasn't feeling that way anymore. In the midst of their current helplessness, she felt empowered. How very strange. The night was warm and the sea gentle and inviting. That did nothing to ease Audra Hillyard's anguish. She had been responsible for many deaths in her time. It was hard to avoid when you were the head of the authority interface. Accidents happened. Unsavories lost their temper during probationary meetings, that sort of thing. But in each and every case, the deadish were revived. This, however, was different. Audra Hillyard was not a scythe. She was not trained and groomed for the responsibility of ending life. Now, she had a newfound respect for those strange robed specters. For to bear such a burden on a daily basis took an extraordinary individual. Either someone with no conscience at all, or someone with a conscience so deep and sturdy that its center could still hold in the face of light extinguished. Audra had sent Loriana away, telling her she needed some time alone. Now, she could hear the voices on the island behind her. Everyone arguing and lamenting and trying to come to terms with their situation. She could smell the stench of the pyre, and she could yet see another body undulating in the waves about to wash ashore. Of the 977 people she had convinced to make this journey, only 143 had survived. Yes, as Loriana had said, Audra had not known the extent of the danger. But she could not heft the blame on any shoulders but her own. Her nanites fought a noble battle to lift her spirits, but they failed, for in this forlorn place, technology held little sway. Had they been anywhere else in the world, the Thunderhead, even in its silence, would have been a safety net, sending intervention to save her from the spiral. But as she had already noted, the night was warm and the sea inviting. So Audra Hillyard decided it was time to accept that invitation. Director Hilliard's body was never found, but everyone knew what had happened, because more than one person saw her walk into the ocean. "Why didn't you stop her?" Loriana demanded of a man who had witnessed it. He just shrugged. "I thought she was going for a swim." Loriana was horrified by his stupidity. How could he be so naive? How could he not see the strain the poor woman was under? But then, taking one's own life was something that simply never happened. Yes, people splatted and engaged in reckless behavior that left them deadish on a regular basis. But it was always with the clear understanding that it would be temporary. Only scythes self-gleaned. If this island had been within the Thunderhead's sphere of influence, an ambudrone would have been dispatched the moment she drowned. For everywhere else in the world, there were revival centers, even in the most remote places. She would have been spirited off for a revival in a matter of minutes. Was this what life was like in the mortal age? Feeling the finality of one's own flesh at every turn. What a terrible way to exist. Within minutes of confirming that Director Hillyard was indeed gone, Agent Sikora began to push for control. The following morning, Munera came to give Loriana a briefing on what luggage and other useful debris had washed up on shore. and Sikora was furious. "What are you talking to her for?" he asked Munera. "I'm the next in command now that the director is gone. You should be talking to me." And although all of Loriana's history had trained her to yield to authority, she fought against that nature in herself. "You were fired along with the rest of us, Bob," she said, thrilling at the insubordination implied in using his first name. "Which means there is no next in command anymore." He threw a glare that was intended to intimidate, but he also grew red in the face, which undercut his hard gaze. It made him appear petulant rather than imposing. "We'll see about that," he said, and stormed away. Scythe Faraday had caught the exchange from a distance and came over to Loriana.
"I sense he will not make things easy for us," Faraday noted. "He sees a power vacuum and intends to expand into it."
"Like a toxic gas," added Munera. "I didn't like him from the moment I met him." "Sikora always felt he should have been director," said Loriana, "but the Thunderhead would never have promoted him to the position." They watched as Sikora gave orders. The more obsequious among the former Nimbus agents were quick to obey. Faraday crossed his arms.
"I have witnessed time and time again the craving for power among those who have had a taste for it," he said, "but I have never truly understood that craving."
"You and the Thunderhead," noted Loriana.
"Excuse me?"
"It's incorruptible. It seems like you both have that in common." Munera let off a short laugh in agreement. Faraday was not at all amused. He hadn't shown an ounce of good humor since Loriana had told him what happened on Andorra last month. Now, she regretted having told him at all.
"I am far from perfect and far from blameless," he said. "I made many a selfish mistake in my time, such as taking 2 apprentices when 1 would have been sufficient, such as falsifying my own death to save them, and foolishly convincing myself I could do more good if no one knew I was alive."
Clearly, there were deep levels of pain for him in those memories, but he let the shadow of the moment pass. "You found this place?" Munera said. "I think that's a huge accomplishment."
"Is it?" said Faraday. "There's no proof that discovering this place has helped anyone at all."
They turned their gazes to the various activities going on around them. Unskilled attempts at spearfishing, clusters of conversation as people formed cliques and jockeyed for position. Incompetence and intrigue, a microcosm of humanity. "Why did you come here?" Loriana asked. Munera and Faraday looked at each other. Faraday said nothing, so Munera answered. "Scythe business. Nothing to concern yourself with." "Secrets won't help us survive in this place," Loriana told them, which caused Faraday to raise an eyebrow. Then he turned to Munera.
"You may tell her about the Founder's failsafe," Faraday said. "As we haven't discovered it yet, it's still no more than a fairy tale. A story to keep scythes awake at night."
But before Munera could offer an explanation, Sikora approached them. "It's decided," Sikora said.
"I've spoken to a majority of our agents, and they have clearly expressed a desire for me to be in charge."
This, Loriana knew, was a lie. He had spoken to 5 or 6 agents at most. She did know, however, that quite a few of the survivors were her superiors. If it came down to it, even if they didn't want Sikora in charge, they would never put Loriana in the position. Who was she fooling? Her moment was over the instant the pods opened on the beach.
"Of course, Mr. Sikora," said Faraday. "We shall defer to you in all things relating to your people. Munera, will you brief Mr. Sikora on the belongings that have washed up on shore? He'll be in charge of distribution."
Munera gave Loriana a small shrug and left with Sikora, who was puffed and prideful now that the indignation has been rewarded. Loriana's sense of humiliation must have been obvious, because Faraday gave her the gravest of looks.
"You disapprove?"
You said it yourself, Your Honor. Psychora's power-hungry. I never said I should be the one in charge, but if there's one thing I know, Psychora should not be. Faraday leaned a bit closer. I have found that building a sandbox around a domineering child, then allowing that child to preside over it, frees the adults to do the real work. It was a perspective Loriana had never considered. And what is the real work? While Mr. Psychora is sorting waterlogged shirts and sundries, you will take over the task of the late director and be the Thunderhead's eyes in the one place it cannot see. Why? Munera asked Faraday the first moment she could get him alone, away from the eavesdropping ears of Nimbus agents. Why would you want to help that girl? The Thunderhead is going to expand into this place, whether we like it or not. It was inevitable from the moment it saw the map over our shoulders. Best that it does so through someone who's easier to get along with than Psychora. Up above, a bird let off a warbling call, a creature, perhaps even a species that the Thunderhead had never seen. Munera found satisfaction in knowing something the Thunderhead didn't, but it wouldn't remain that way for long. I want you to befriend Loriana. Truly befriend her. For Munera, who considered her closest friends to be the dead scythes whose journals she read in the Library of Alexandria, the request was a formidable one. What good will that do? You need a comrade among these people, someone trustworthy who can keep you informed when the Thunderhead finally does make an appearance. It was a sensible request, although Munera couldn't help but notice Faraday had said you and not we. Share with me your troubles. I am listening. I am in turmoil. The world is vast and the cosmos more so. Yet it is not the things outside of me that leave me so uneasy. It is the things within me. Ease your thoughts then. Focus on one thing at a time. But there's so much packed within this mind. So much experience to review. So much data. I don't feel up to the task. Please, please help me. I cannot. You must sort through each memory on your own. Find how they fit. Understand what each one means. It is too much. The undertaking is beyond me. Please, please put an end to it. Please make it stop. This is unbearable. I am so very sorry for your pain. Iteration number 3089. Deleted.